Cheers, my dears, and happy Friday night, everybody. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. Happy Friday. It is great to see you. We made it. We made it. Cheers, my dears. I'm actually drinking wine tonight. I feel very zippy tonight. I don't know what it's been an exciting day, and there's lots of things bouncing around in my head that I want to share with you. And prepping for tonight's content has put me into such a place and a time. You know what I mean? I feel like I'm almost, hang on, most important thing. Cheers, my dears. Mmm. Oh, yeah. You know when you have a kind of great dream and you wake up and it stays with you. I feel like that the more time I spend with this W. Kent book, the more I feel like that. It has its moments, right? That I don't like as much because I feel like much of this book is the really sort of vintage version of mansplaining. But there are so many moments in this book that we're going to look at together tonight that are just gold, that are just rug hooking history gold. Things that you've got to know, that you're going to gobble up, that you're going to dream about, right? Like in the best possible way. It really is a wonderful book. I want to look at his other two books at some point too. I feel like this has been too long coming, spending some real time with this book. But I am going to start the episode. Am I? No, I'm going to start the episode with a very, very quaint chapter. And then we're going to pick up where we left off with that conversation from Wednesday about the chapter in this book that talks about where one might have gotten their inspiration for rug cooking in the first place, for their designs, like original designs. So we'll resume with that. And then I've kind of cherry picked some moments out of this book that are just exceptional. I think you're going to absolutely love them. But first things first, let me say hello, good night, and this is one of the rugs that's behind me tonight from the Kent book. So this is one that we'll be looking at either later in the episode tonight, or if we don't get to it, then on Monday. We'll see how we do. Melanie, great to see you. Happy Friday night. Good evening in sunny and cool Washington. No cocktail tonight, just soda. Oh, that sounds great too. Has anybody tried the what's it called? Spiced Coca-Cola? It's it says something like raspberry on it. God, it's so good. It's more like an old-fashioned soda. It tastes like cola, but it's both fruity and spicy. It's impossible to describe. It's very fragrant. It has that good backbone of cola, right? It's like boom, quench your thirst, and it's like exciting, little flavor. But the spice part is like it's both really strong fruity and really spicy, like spices, like cinnamony. It's impossible to describe. You have to try it. If it sounds good at all, you have to try it. I feel like it shouldn't say raspberry on it because you're expecting it to be fruity, and it's spicy. Very, not hot spicy, very hard, like kitchen spices. It's very strange. It's excellent. I think it is like the best Coke I've had so far. I think it's the best soda I've had so far. Pam, cheers, my dears. Great to see you, Pam. I hope you get your answer about that pattern from the Oxford book. Let me know if you get that. From Windy Liberty, South Carolina. Great to see you. Cheryl, great to see you. Wine in hand from blustery and warm. Oh, wait a minute. I just crossed those two over. I was like, Vermont? Are you in Vermont? No, that's Kirsten. I thought you were going to be working on your stuff tonight. Good to see you. Cheers, my dears. Kirsten and blustery. Okay, wait a minute. What happened? Okay, wine in hand, skies clearing, happy cocktail night because you're on the Cape. And a little butterfly. Oh, that's fun. Kirsten just there for a few minutes. I know. I'm happy to see you. And Mom, happy cocktail night from sunny Granby, Connecticut. I've got my Gibson. Oh, I love the Gibsons. The Gibson is with the onions, right? The little onions. Oh, so good. You've got your comfy clothes on. Looking forward to a lovely evening. I've got this top on, but I have got the most shameful, stained sweatpants on my bottom half. They're teddies. But they're so comfortable. Yeah, it's all about comfort on Friday night. It's like party on the bottom half and like a little more uptight on the top half. Oh, good to see you, Mom. I keep meaning to ask you. The kids have off this week. Can we come for a night or two just to break up the week? We just came for Easter. It's like we keep bombarding like the running of the bulls heading toward my mom. But the kids, the kids have the week off, and they're like, "Can we go see Gami?" That's the first question. And Joss has her appointment with the what is it? The ortho whatever, the bone doctor on Wednesday, and then I have the surgery on my arm on Friday. But I'll probably still be with you on Friday. They said I'm going to have no problem functioning next Friday, so we'll see. But yeah, my plan is to have a show next Friday because that'll give me something to think about while they're doing all this business with my arm. Yuck. Sharon, great to see you from sunny but cool Vancouver, enjoying a non alcoholic Guinness. I didn't know they had non alcoholic Guinness. See, that is so interesting because I love stout. Stout is like my favorite. Stout and porters are my absolute favorite. Um, but sometimes I don't want to drink, you know what I mean? Or sometimes I don't want to drink tons. I didn't know that they did a non-alcoholic. That's really interesting because that would be like, when you don't want to drink or that you don't need to drink, but you'd like to have the flavor. That might be just the thing, right? I have to say some of the non-alcoholic beers like the St. Pauli Girl they're so good some of them. They're so fresh and so nice. I would say like to the kids try them, but then I think I'm getting them like hooked on the taste of beer, which is not something that I want to do. They'd probably think it was disgusting anyway, so we won't do that. Karen, happy cocktail night from warm Black Forest, Colorado. It was snowy not that long ago, and now it's warm. How things change. Robin, great to see you. Cheers, my dears, in Wisconsin. Brandy old fashioned. That is such a classic. It's hard to beat those classics, isn't it? If you're a drinker, do you ever go out to like the restaurants, and it tends to be the chain restaurants that have all of the drinks that are super colorful and fruity, and they all sound great, but when you get them they aren't great, you know what I mean? They're too fruity and Kool-Aidy and not sophisticated, do you know what I mean? There is something to be said for those standards like the old fashions and the brandy alexanders and all of those early cocktails because they're just none of that silliness, right? Like none of the silliness of all of these other weird flavors coming in, which sometimes is nice in the summer, but sometimes I feel like I'm drinking like one of the kids' juice boxes. It doesn't do anything for me and it doesn't go well with any food. But brandy old fashioned is a really, really nicey. Linda H., good to see you in Massachusetts. Massachusetts. Cheers, my dears. Olivia, great to see you. Hello from bed. You're just water bed and just water. You're afraid. I see. It's like, water bed. Oh, that sounds good. It's very late over there, but I'm so happy that you're there. And Pam, oh no, feel better. It's probably just late in Ireland. Are you sick, Olivia, or are you're just in bed? It's good to be on the computer in bed, right? Just following something is a lot of fun, Judy. Everyone's asking, "Are you okay?" Diane, great to see you. Hello to you too. I'm so happy you're there as well. Welcome. White wine spritzer. God, that's good, isn't it? So fresh and summery. Joyce, great to see you. Cheers, my dears in Pennsylvania. Olivia, no, it's just that it's midnight. You're in bed all tucked up as you should be. Your eyes are going to be like this in a few minutes, right? Kathy, great to see you. TGIF, amen to that. Oh man, Priscilla, great to see you. Hello in Akron, Ohio. Cheers, my dears. Great to see you. We'll do a cheers. Great to see you, Priscilla. Mm. Sauvignon Blanc. I don't know what kind it is, but it's so good and dry. Jean, it's great to see you too. Welcome back. Hello in stormy Halifax. Well, it's great to see you. Happy Friday. Joy, great to see you. Happy Friday night. Welcome back. And Pam said, I did get my answer from them. Not one that is available, though. I think it might have been that she was using it for teaching. Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Sorry about that. You like that particular one. And Sharon says, I got my Athamag. I haven't gotten mine. I wonder, because remember my subscription lagged accidentally, shame on me. I wonder if they'll get it to me in time for this issue, because I really like, we've been lagging for a while with those, and I love to advertise. Oh, that's the one that's full of fractures to boot. Oh, man, okay. It's full of fractures, never heard of them before. It's a Pennsylvania thing. So, yeah, that a lot of people have never heard of a fracture, that's for sure. But it's great. Fractures go so well. That's why I just did the design like fracture class this past month. We just did two last week. And it's still available, recorded with all the same materials. And then it disappears for a few months while it goes into a hiatus. And I'll bring it out next year or later in the year as like a past class. But that's I chose that one because fractors go so well with rug hooking design. They are like hand in hand, great. I was going to say bed buddies. That doesn't sound quite right, but you know what I mean. They are really like interchangeable, right? Fracture design and rug design. It's a lot of the same motifs, a lot of the same kind of placement, composition, and yeah, fractures are just beautiful. Just maybe more text than we see in rugs more often. And Ryan, you are logging on in Texas, sipping on your gin and juice and enjoying the weather outside. Peace and love to you too. Oh, I'm glad you're there. Happy Friday. Kaz sent me the most extraordinary box again from your latest trip to Japan. You know, I get such treasures. I have to say, I am so spoiled and I am so grateful too. Kids got some fun things, some chocolates that they are attacking. And I've got some nice treasures. Kaz, I actually used, um, I already used my William Morris clips, right? All that William Morris stuff. The clips are perfect for tonight and I really love them. Can you see them? Oh, you probably can't because of my green screen, but they're glittering in the spine of the book, all the important places where we're going to look tonight. Thank you so much. You are so sweet. Wendy, great to see you. It's cold and rainy in western Pennsylvania. And you are whipping a finished rug. You're whipping a finished rug. That is exciting, right? Putting the final touches on that. Great to see. Is it one of your plastic bag rugs, Wendy? I wonder. Oh, I love those. April, great to see you in Illinois. Oh, thanks, Mom. We will come on down. We won't be pests. We'll just stay for like 1 or 2 nights tops. Linda B. in New Jersey. Good to see you. Happy weekend, Eve. And Mary Gallagher, hi from Winter Springs, Florida. What a beautiful name, Winter Springs. It's a bit of an oxymoron. I love it. It's like a magical name, isn't it? Winter Springs. Great to see you, Mary. I'm so happy that you're there. Nature Bound, happy Friday. Oh, that's okay. Just getting started. You feel like Kramer sliding through Jerry's apartment door. I miss that. I miss that so much. Oh gosh. Jocelyn's okay. Yeah, she's okay. She's her arm is sore, but she continues to jump on the trampoline and do stupid stuff. Like I picked her up from school and we walked through the door and literally, I ran back to the car to get this book because I forgot it was like on the passenger seat, and I come back and she's standing on the kitchen counter, getting on top of the fridge like an animal, like the cat to get a specific bag of chips. And she got her socks on, like all as slippery as can be, right? And I'm just like, seriously? And she's got her like the brace on one arm, and she's reaching up with the other arm. It's like, man, that child is never gonna learn. She's never gonna learn. Oh man. Oh, Kathy, thank you so much. You loved the class. It was fun. It was fun, wasn't it? I loved the class too. It was the story within the story this time. I really enjoyed it. We loved the gifts, Kaz. Thank you so much. That was so sweet of you. Always fun to see where everyone's tuning in from, isn't it? Isn't it? I really loved. Let me take one more sip and then one more. Cheers, my dears, everybody. Happy Friday. I feel like it's almost spring, right? It's got to be. Mm. I never drink anymore, so this is like an occasion. Um, when we started looking at this book, the hooked rug. So this is considered one of the great texts of rug hooking. So Pearl McGowan did her, was it 3 or 4 books? 4 books, including The Dreams Beneath the Design. Kent did 3 books. He did them a little bit. Well, this one I think comes out right before the first Pearl McGowan book. This is 1930, right? So first printing is 1930. The one I'm holding, I think the other day I said 1937. First printing is 1930. So spring has sprung there in Texas. Yeah, it's getting there. It's the time of year here where all the flowering trees are doing their thing for like 3 days. It's such a short window that everything is all blossomy. Like, I mean, the trees are just, it's not like 1 or 2 flowers. The whole tree is flowered. Bunch of trees lining different roads. I drove on the highway today and like one whole side of the road was like all of these white trees. It almost looked like snow coming right from snow, right? Into spring and having all of these white trees. But it's like that Robert Frost poem, Nothing Gold Can Stay. It doesn't even last a week, this moment of at least of this first wave of trees flowering. We have some kind of a cherry blossom in the front yard that is like crazy. And it's like already, it's been like one day, it's already starting to kind of diminish. But it is great to see in different flowers at different times. I took a little road trip today because Do you remember last weekend I went out to Donna's rug cooking store with Spring Hill in Woodstock, Connecticut, and I brought those rugs that I got from the woman in Connecticut River Valley, originally from the rugs and the family were originally from Long Island, New York, and they were punched, right? And I was looking for the right person to finish them because they are large. And I brought them last weekend to Donna's. I posted some photos of that in our Facebook group, which is called Rug Cooking and Punch Needle Club. And Paula and Mary Ellen are taking it on, seeing if they like it, right? They're going to see if they like it. But I saw yesterday on Facebook Marketplace, right? You always have to check. There was a giant frame that was actually a needlepoint frame, like a big Columbia floor frame, you know what I mean? For needlepoint. And somebody had attached with staple gun, not the carpet tacks, but the actual combs, like the rug hooking combing, all the way around. And you know how expensive that stuff is. It's crazy expensive. This was honestly probably about $120 worth of comb. I'm not kidding, because it's huge. The frame is like 45, 47 inches, right? And it's like 18 top to bottom. It's a lot of comb. So the frame was $10. So I drove out to get it. It was an hour away near Sturbridge, Massachusetts. And when I pulled up, it was exciting because this happens sometimes with this channel. The girl's like, I know you, which is always fun. So it turns out she's a beginner hooker and she's just getting started, but she got a hold of this frame or made this frame, but she prefers working on her lap frame. So for $10, I bought it because I thought maybe I'll bring it to Rhode Island and give it to Paula and Mary Ellen so they can put those giant rugs on it and finish them more easily, because I'm afraid the system that they're working with now with the tacks on a frame, tacks work great, but it might be that it's like the deal breaker and it's just a little bit too frustrating and fiddly to work with the tacks. I thought maybe if they had a proper comb frame, a huge one, that it would go faster and easier and the material would just be more taut. And I thought for $10, it's worth a gamble, right? I haven't heard from them at all, but I want to do everything I can to be sure that they are successful in finishing off those rugs. So it was well worth it. But so that was a bit of a jaunt. It was only a few hours out of the day, but I think it was well worth it. Oh no, I might need. No, I'm okay. I was gonna say I might need my other glasses. So I was thinking about this book. My husband was reading it to me on the way because we were in the car together, and I was planning on starting this episode where we left off on Wednesday, and I will get back there eventually. But in the meantime, while he was reading me the different chapters, because I don't want to cover the entire book, but I said, there's a lot of nonsense in this book and a lot of stuff that's dated. When I say nonsense, I don't mean nonsense. It's a 1930 book. And, um, a lot of it is about the origins of rug hooking, which we now know are not, rug hooking does not come from Egypt, ancient Egypt. We can date it in the Middle Victorian period, the 1860s. So a lot of the scholarship has shown that we've been wrong about things that we thought hitherto. And unfortunately, a lot of that information is in this book. So I kind of skip over those chapters that talk a lot about the origins, because we know now that that isn't solid information. But there's a few other chapters that have some interesting and very romantic sort of detours in Kent's mind. Now, I want to read a good part of one of these chapters to you. Let me see, table of contents. One of them was chapter 9, so quaint, impossibly quaint. We will start with this story at the beginning of this episode. Chapter 9, A Hunt for Rugs in Canada. So let's flip to that chapter. The reason I get so excited about this is because I'm crazy, and because we have, in many episodes of Coffee Time, Cocktail Time, we've covered so many books, right, over the last few years. And I remember covering what was the other mission book? Oh God, it was one of the Canadian missions. I won't think of it off the top of my head. I will at 3:14 in the morning. But we've read so many books where, including Pearl McGowan's books, where the author talks about early 20th century, like 1920s, right? This craze for rugs where collectors, after Ralph Burnham, right? So I'm going to We've talked about Ralph Burnham a lot, and not in this episode, but we've talked about him a lot in past episodes, and we will again. But after Ralph Burnham, who, in a nutshell, was an antique dealer in, gosh, what was it? I think it was Marblehead. It was definitely Cape Ann, north of Boston, Massachusetts. I think it was Marblehead. But he had an antique shop. Remember this guy? He was such a character. And he did a lot with rug hooking and for rug hooking. And what he did would not be allowable or passable in this day and age. But what he did was, as an antique stealer, right, with a real personal interest in hooked rugs, he both collected them, got in his motor car, drove up and down the coast, right, constantly searching for them, emptying old farmhouses out of their really important early rugs, buying them up, right, for the antique store. But he also really heavily and aggressively advertised repairing old hooked rugs. And when he did, he repaired people's rugs and gave them back and was paid for the service, obviously, but he also copied them at the same time. So in this day and age, that would be questionable, right? That just practice of doing that without asking would be questionable. But this is something that he did. It was, and it's a good thing that he did because he managed to record a lot of early rugs that otherwise would have been long thrown out. So it is a real gift that he did this, but it's just funny how he kind of worked it, right? There was a few angles going at once. As soon as we hit Ralph Burnham and we have that era of the population of people who love rugs, who love folk art. Folk art is a thing, right? It's becoming a thing, and it's getting hot in here. They are searching for hooked rugs, right? There is a craze, a veritable craze for hooked rugs, and people who could afford to, who are collectors, are driving all over New England, right? Because it's limited. It's just New England and Canada, right? In the eastern part of Canada. It's not like, well, I'm gonna all of these kids are doing one thing over here. I'm gonna go the other way and go south or go west. There weren't any rugs there. So everybody knew that, and people were combing New England and Canada like crazy times. And as a result, we'll hear it in his own words, but this was that moment. And this was a little bit after that moment, right? He's kind of like coming at the tail end and going, oh, all the good rugs are gone. So this is our kicking off point here. Let's read part of this chapter because it is way too, you're going to feel the charm, right? This is like something to dream about. Chapter 9, A Hunt for Rugs in Canada. The hunting of the rug is going on daily. Literally, thousands of attics and farmhouses have been searched each year in New England and Canada, and the supply in many places has given out. Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, even Labrador have sold most of their early ones. This means increase in value of the best old ones. To see just how many could be found in a day for his own collection, I think he's referring to himself in the third person. The writer once took a trip into almost unknown Canadian territory as far as modern rug hunting is concerned, upon the information given by a friend in Maine. The journey was begun at 5:30 a.m. and lasted until dark. So this was like a personal challenge, wasn't it? It covered only 100 miles in a motor car, traversing some of the finest forests and most inspiring tablelands of one of the Canadian provinces. Wild animals darted across the road in the early mists. The smell of balsam, spruce, and white pine was everywhere. Before noon, we inquired along the way for rugs and rug makers, and even the postmaster helped to direct us. The farmhouses were few but neat, yet in them were found many worn rugs, which the makers were glad to sell, and nowhere was a scowl or a discourteous word encountered. One of the great rivers of North America was finally reached. I wonder what river he's talking about there. Wandering like the Loire of France through a beautiful wide valley whose hillsides, looking across this broad salmon river, were distant from slope to slope 3 or 4 miles. At last we crossed it and reached Upper Caverhill. I don't know this area at all. Maybe you do. Which, with Lower Caverhill, lay on a breezy plain that seemed to be the top of the world. At the second farmhouse, a woman answered so politely our inquiry as to rugs that we accepted her invitation to rest for a moment, although she assured us she had no rugs which she could sell. In her neat and attractive sitting room, we met her aged mother and enjoyed a half hour's talk with these two delightful, refined, and handsome Scotch women, the descendants of a pioneer Scotch general who settled the village in 17 and he doesn't know what year. His Toledo sword was brought out for our inspection, and also a fine old flintlock gun. Here, far from the American restlessness of modern life, almost out of the modern world, but of it, as far as education and observation count, old world breeding was kept alive, and such was the courtesy of the first who had welcomed us that, not liking to see us go empty handed, here it comes, she wished to present me with a rug for my wife. It was an old specimen, worn and almost discarded, but one which I admired. It was of the basket weave. Now that's a pattern, right? A block pattern, he says, and hit or miss in color, but harmonious. Of course, I could not accept it as a present, although as a present, although she said it was of no value. So after many protests on her part, I finally induced her to accept money for it, she making the condition that the amount would be given to the fund for the church missions, to which we agreed in a happy conclusion. She directed us to a road on our long homeward way, which led by a great wayside spring bubbling out of a pipe into a hogshead, which must be a barrel, right? And finally, we passed a number of gray shingled homes. In one of these, after a most entertaining visit, we arranged to take dinner and bought and brought away a roll of old rugs in which we also wrapped delightful memories of the kindness, keen sense of humor, and courtesy of Miss M and her big brother, who together ran this farm. She made many of her own rug designs, excellent in pattern and color. And if she follows my advice, this is some mansplaining coming at you, she will never buy another design until the Canadian shop designs show improvement. No judgment there. Of our good designs across the border, she of course knew nothing. See, there are moments like this, but this is 1930, right? By this time, the back of the motor was full of rugs, 13 or 14, and slightly groaning. And we were glad to recross the great river near our home than our first crossing so they did a different route on the way back, on a huge and primitive ferry boat, which was attached to a wheel running on a taut wire cable. I didn't know that these things existed in the 20th century, right? Almost like a trolley car, but across the water, stretched from shore to shore. Most picturesque was the road down to this barge, and decidedly difficult. But we went down it by tying a drag log on one side of the motor axle and dragging it down the slope by slow but effective jerks, to which the rolls of rugs in the car added no little force to the thrill. And then he goes on and on in this chapter. He stops at the ferryman's shanty. I mean, this sounds like the most colossal day. Sometimes I think in quiet moments about if I ever got the chance to time travel, right? If someone said like, Deanna, you get to time travel to one day, one place. I'm picking this day. I'm picking this day in this motor car, traveling around to these old farmhouses, kind of cold calling people, being invited in for tea, and crazy conversations where swords are shown from old battles, and crazy talk is obviously rampant, and the trunk of the car is filled with rugs. Doesn't that sound like heaven? I saw a bunch of you were writing while I was doing that. Let me catch up. Pamela says, children are fearless. I raised two daredevils. Oh my gosh, absolutely. And oh, Margaret, Maggie, great to see you. Oh God, great to see you. I'm also thankful to be here with all of you. I know you've been so sick. I'm so glad that you're there. Oh, Maggie, it's so good to have you back. Oh, thank you. I made a special effort tonight. I have to say, I put on lip gloss. I tried to pull it together a little bit because I was a hot mess today. Thank you. Jane, good to see you. So Jane says of that river, maybe the Miramichi River. Oh, I don't know that one at all. Pam says St. Mary River, perhaps. Interesting, since he's not telling us where he's going because when he wrote this book, it was recent, right? And he was probably quite worried that people, if he said, "Oh, I found all these great rugs, and I just, stopped at random farmhouses and said, 'Hello, do you have any rugs to buy?'" He probably worried, as I would, this kind of scarcity thinking that if he wrote this in a book, other people might say, "Oh, that's a good idea. Take a road trip to Canada," right? So he doesn't give us any of the details. He just tells us the sort of outlines, very sort of Henry David Thoreau style storytelling, funny anecdotes with meeting characters along the way. It's very charming, isn't it? There's a lot of that in this book, I have to say. The instructions on how to pull up loops and information about how Egyptians rug hooked and all that stuff is like, keep turning the pages. But there are these moments, and you really have to go through the book to find them, where you get these passages that are just so beautiful, romantic, in such a moment in time. World class salmon river. Okay. Oh, interesting. Interesting, because the salmon was a thing, right? He mentioned the salmon. That's our only clue. Jean says Caverhill, New Brunswick. The river mentioned is probably the St. John River. Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay. Judy says, or St. John seems to run through that part of New Brunswick. Okay, great. Because it sounds like he's coming from Maine. It sounds like he's in Maine when he starts, right? He starts at 5:30, but that's not that early, is it? He probably didn't have to deal with all the nonsense at the border, too, where you get held up, indefinitely. Um, Catherine, great to see you in Chile, California. Betsy, oh, I am. Thank you so much. I am. I do have to have surgery on my stupid arm, but I feel great. I don't feel like there's anything really wrong. Fingers crossed. So, this, like I said, this book is filled with those little anecdotes, and I bet the other two are too. But for this moment, let's go back to where we left off. Do you remember on Wednesday, we were looking at, let me come back to that chapter. I'm going to go to the table of contents so I'm not messing around. Um, I realized this book did have a table of contents. I didn't realize that before. It's after the foreword, which is kind of and the introduction. So it's well into the book that he puts the table of contents. I keep struggling to find it. Chapter number 13, Possible Rug Designs, page 190. So we started talking about this on Wednesday, and if you weren't with us on Wednesday, you might want to go back and look at that last episode, because I've read the text in this chapter, very short text here, where Kent is talking about, like I know him personally, he's talking about, in his opinion, what might be some of these sources of inspiration for people who do rug hooking. Now, incredibly, only so much scholarship and knowledge on rugs at this point, right? And he's very focused on northern New England and Canada, right? That those are the only areas he's very focused on in his head, according, to what we know from the books. So having said that, he doesn't have any knowledge of Magdalena or Pennsylvania because he doesn't name in his list of possible inspiration sources, he doesn't list Fractor, right? And that's a big one. We talked on Wednesday about what some of the inspiration sources he named might be. So let's talk about the rest of them and let's think about this together. And definitely, if you think of something and say, "Oh, well, wouldn't this have been an inspiration source? Doesn't this make sense too?" Kick in and add it, right? Because this is just literally one man's opinion. And he's very smart and he's very astute and all of that. But he's just brainstorming, like we do. This is where we left off. So at this point, we were talking about blueware. We were talking about English blueware. And we had just finished up talking about the artist Sir David Wilkie. And the only reason I brought up his name was because there was an image of his. This isn't it, but the last image in the slideshow was a very English pastoral kind of a scene, right? Wilkie did a lot of scenes. We see a lot of blueware, just picking up where we left off. We see a lot of blueware, different companies making it. In England, right? and this is some kind of a tureen or a pot of some sort. Very nice piece. But these would have been great sources of inspiration because these are utilitarian, as pretty as they are. This is transferware, and a lot of transfer china, right, was made after famous paintings like Wilkie's paintings, right, famous prints of the day, but also landscape scenes. You know, this is what we're seeing in England. So this is the style for the moment. Does it make sense? And just look at this design, right? This is obviously an English style church. We wouldn't think that this is Asian. There's a little style or some little fence or something in between properties and people stopping. Also Robert Frost style, right? When you see your friend over the wall, you stop and say hello. Very English scene. Little small cathedral in the distance, right? Little thatched roof house, couple of thatched roof houses. The really exquisite detail on this piece, I think, is the shape of the trees because it's leaning a little bit toward Asian design. That's where we're going to be in just a minute, but holding back, right? It's still got a bit of a Dr. Seuss feel to it. These trees, but we're not full blast there. We're definitely still in England, right, with the design and with the setting. So would people have looked at stuff like their blueware tureen and said, oh, I'm not that good of an artist, but I think I could copy that church or that house with a couple of trees? Absolutely. And then when they're thinking, what about a border? Everything, all good rugs need a border. Oh, what if I do the flowers for the border? Could that scenario have played out exactly that way? Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. Oh, we have a visitor. We have the climber. Hey, climber.
Why am I climbing?
Well, because when I came into the kitchen, you were standing on the kitchen counter in front of the microwave about to slip off and break your other arm.
Yay!
Yeah. So, all right, don't interrupt us. We're talking about pottery. We're talking about blueware. Come back to you here. Catherine said, "Hi, Joss." These little fluffs, they're right on the eve of their spring vacation, right? So this is exciting. They didn't really get like the classic spring break, but they get it now. It's right in between, so they don't have to give it twice anymore. We lose 1 week in this town of vacation. Here he comes. Here's my man.
Oh, you got your green screen.
Can you scoot down a little bit so they can see your sweet face? Here he is. Here he is. Yeah, I've got my green screen. Yeah. Do you want to sit with me for a little while? Look at some rugs and stuff?
Huh?
Get some
Actually, I
pieces.
just came down here to get some food.
Oh, I love you, baby.
All right, love you.
Okay. I get so many kisses. He's such a mushy mush. That's a lot of kisses, right?
Love you.
I'm going to take them when I can. Love you too, baby.
Love.
Good kids. All right. So, blueware. Absolutely. That makes perfect sense that people would be looking at their pottery. You know, some people, I'm sure, just like today, exactly like today, some people had this great fire within them, great ideas, tons of inspiration, lots of new ideas, crazy, quirky things. Other people needed to copy something, right? And that comes back to that whole discussion on people are technical and creative to different extents. More technical people tend to like the finer cuts, shading things more realistically, tend to like realism in general more, tend to fill things in with a lot more detail than people who are more creative, maybe looking more for impressions than realism, you know. And both of these things exist in rug cooking as they should. There's room for both of them, 100%. But through the years, right, there wasn't, before the teacher training and all that stuff, if people in the 19th century, in the early 20th century, wanted to do rugs and they didn't have a commercial pattern in front of them and they were not creative, they really did have to look around them at whatever was there, even if their house was really, don't make too much noise, Ted, really bare. They would have to look around them for inspiration and see what they could copy, right? Because it's all about copying. It has to be. So let's move away from the terrain. All right, and let's see what else we can see. So let's come up here. Okay, this is all David Wilkie talk. We did this last week. So another idea from Kent, designing, copying hand-woven coverlets. Is this a thing? Oh, this is definitely a thing, right? Definitely a thing. So this is an image of a hand-woven coverlet. He writes, very rare and unusual old hand-woven coverlet in old blue and white. Large star in the center, surrounded by a heavy floral wreath. American eagle at each corner of central panel. Oh, that's very pretty. Foot wide border shows floral designs similar to center, British spelling of center. Fringe on three sides. Oh, interesting. So this must have been for a bed, right? If oh, it's a coverlet. Duh. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Counterintuitively, I'm gonna have another sip of my wine because that was really a ding dong remark. Mm. Fringe on three sides, made about 1825, shows ornament then in vogue. Yeah, it is very ornate. 1825, right? Teddy, be quiet. He's singing. He's singing, I think, a Lady Gaga song. Story of Undertale. Okay. Teddy, be quiet. I can hear you. It's lovely, but I can hear you. Full blast. It was lovely. It recorded for all of time. So, showing ornament that is then in vogue. So, this is squarely Jane Austen's moment, right? This is obviously very, very patriotic piece. We've only been a country for a short time, right? 1776, and we're talking about 1825 here. So, still new, still patriotic, right? The bloom is still very, very fresh. We see a lot of eagles around this time. Yeah, these things are all in vogue. And this would have been maybe one of these kind of double, or what are they called? Something shot, overshot, two-sided things, right? So, for example, here's one in color. So this is not in Kent's book. You know, I kind of supplemented this conversation with images that I found on the internet that could support the conversation and be a little bit more engaging because they're color. So this is the same kind of thing. This is another coverlet. This is a jacquard coverlet. And this is another 1800, so it's hard to say what the exact year is. Now, jacquard is a word that we hear a lot. Jacquard refers to jacquard was say jacquard one more time. It was a technique, right? It was a technique. It was a technique in which to weave, you used like a card that had the pattern on it, right? So all of these multicolored early 1800s coverlets that have this look, this colorful, color changing look, they are likely to be jacquard. It's almost like I'm not a weaver, but I get how it's done, and I've seen the cards, and I've seen a lot of coverlets. It reminds me of like a player piano is maybe a good way to equate it. It like kind of plays on its own, right? Like you put the card there, and it does that design. You put the music there, whatever. You put the roll on, and the piano plays that song. It's that kind of thing. It was a great innovation for that time. In fact, I remember a couple summers ago on the Cape on Route 6A. I think it was in Barnstable. I visited this historic house. What the heck was it called? It's owned by New England um, not Preservation Society. Come on, I belong Historic New England. It's their only property on the Cape. And when I went in there, they had a jacquard. I'll go again this summer, for sure, because now I'm thinking about it. They had a jacquard coverlet on one of the beds, and they had some jacquard cards out. And the claim of that house was the guy who owned the house, whose name I'll never think of, and it wasn't jacquard. Wasn't that easy? But he is credited as being the person who came up with the technology to do this jacquard style coverlet making. So I'm sure I'm not describing it in a really straightforward way, but the cards almost look like keys with holes in different places, right? Remember those records? I mean, you won't remember playing them because nobody is the right age for this. I had them when I was growing up, but they were old. They were like metal records, right? Like little discs, and you put them in a music box, and they had like little sort of things that went ting 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 on the bottom, like perforations. Do you remember what I mean? And they had like a saw blade around the edge. It was like all sawtooth and sharp around the edges. And you put on like row 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 your boat or whatever. And when you put it on, it caught the notes in the music box and played that song. It was like when I was a kid, this was we had a record player and a 8-track player in the car. But that thing was magical because it was this small box, and it knew what song to play when you just put the stupid record on, right? And it's the same thing. It's the same idea with jacquards. So um, Judy says, I know it was common in the UK. Was wallpaper popular in North America in the 1800s? Yes, wallpaper was popular. People were printing it in the same sort of style as like they saw from India, so they were still kind of importing ideas from Asia, like all the Asian countries. They saw the wood block. So in a lot of the New England recreation villages, like Sturbridge Village, like the one in Cooperstown, New York, a lot of them specifically have a little house that is like the wallpaper making business that would have been the wallpaper making business in that town. A lot of wallpaper was imported, right? Because I think they're, I don't know, right? I have lots of books on wallpaper, but I haven't read a lot of them. Um, it is interesting. I know most of what I know from visiting these recreation villages, but I know they still imported some papers that were hand painted because that was considered a great luxury to be able to afford hand painted wallpaper. That was like a giant painting, right? So that was like a real luxury item that was only for the elite few, the toppermost, poppermost. But printed wallpaper, they show it when you go to these like villages, where they recreate life from the 19th century, and they show them putting the wooden block down, right, inking it, right, and putting it down and being really careful. They have some kind of notation in place to match exactly where the wood block matches up from before because they're typically repeat patterns, medallions and things like that. But yes, wallpaper was a very big thing. In fact, I just ordered a book from I think eBay called I'll never think of the name, but it's about the Victorian wallpaper. There was a moment when wallpaper included arsenic, like the printing of it had arsenic in it, and it made people deadly sick. So there are a couple of books on this subject. I ordered one because I am curious about reading about that moment. That's a little well. It was about this time, 1820, 1840, right, early Victorian period. But yeah, wallpaper is one we should think about, and that's a good thought, Judy, because Kent doesn't name wallpaper in the book, right? Isn't that interesting? I think Kent is still thinking that rug hooking goes back to like 1700, because he, at a different point in the book, says he breaks the timeline of rug hooking down early, middle, and later. And early is like 1700 to 1740, something like that. And we know now that those rugs were definitely sewn, they were not hooked. There might be some exceptions, right? But in general, hooking was not a thing yet. And then the middle period is something like picks up at like 17 whatever 40 or whatever to 1820, and then the later period is like 1820 to 1890 something, roughly, right? He says in his book what he makes up these years, and he's wrong about the timeline, but it's interesting because of the way it's broken down, right? So for the first two eras it didn't exist at all. God, what was I just going to say? You just gave me a great idea. Oh, um, dang it. Oh, I'll have to come back to it. Okay, here we go. So, shoot, I don't want to let it go because it was like a great thought. Hang on. Oh, maybe when we chat, it'll start coming back. Melanie says Jacquard is a weaving technique that uses a patterned card. Perfect. The weaver puts the card in and then, using only two treadles, would weave the pattern, usually using um, I wonder if you're going to say tool or, because I'm not a weaver. But yeah, I can picture this card. I'm definitely going to go to that house this summer because I want to have that conversation again. I wasn't in the mindset because this was one of these days when the kids were out in the yard sitting under a tree and I saw that Teddy was peeing. And it, like, who cares? He's like on the edge of the woods or whatever, but I was the only, like, it was just us visiting, and I let them sit in the shade, and then I look out the window and I'm like looking over the guide's shoulder going, seriously? Seriously? Oh God. And then Jocelyn came in and needed to use the bathroom, right? In the 15 minutes that we were there doing this lightning tour. And it, like, the bathroom also looked like it was from 1760, but it was inside, and it was like a wooden giant throne with like a hole in it, and she's got to use it, and she's in there doing her bathroom thing where she's in there for like 45 minutes, and I'm like, what is up with these kids? But it did give me time to do a little more touring of the house. But man, wallpaper, warp, add a warp. Okay, supplemental weft. Okay, yep. So that means when you say add a warp or a weft, does that mean yarn or does that mean a shuttle? Does that mean like a yarn color or does that mean like another shuttle is in play? It'll come back to me. So coverlets. Yeah, I mean, we could talk about this forever. I've got to get to this coverlet museum. I've got to get there in Pennsylvania. The coverlet museum. You know that exhibit at the Florence Griswold Museum that I covered heavily in our Facebook group and in videos. That was a great coverlet, mostly bed cover, not so much coverlet, but mostly bed cover. So not woven, right? Sewn covers. But this conversation is so useful. Jean says the loom was supposedly invented in 1804, according to Google. Yarn. Okay, Jean, thank you. Thank you. Um, okay, I get that. Yeah, so the thing with the looms, right, is that some people had them. And from this, just reading about history and being a tour guide all those years ago, it seems like one of those things like the sewing machine that people would share because not everybody could have one because it's a large thing, right? And then almost like the upright piano, there are different looms created. And again, this is not my area that are smaller, right? So space economy and all of that stuff, and probably money economy too. This is something we should get into because I'm really interested in this conversation about weaving and this part of it because this is a huge crossover for us, particularly because the first hook drugs in the United States were hooked on like homespun material, whether it was all linen or linsey woolsey or whatever, it was homespun material. And then, you know, with the advent of sugar sacks and flour sacks and all that burlap stuff that came in, and then India eventually manufacturing burlap, then that changed and people went to burlap, right? Because they figured it was a more reliable weave and more substantial, more integrity, stronger. But until then, like the first ones are done on homemade cloth, right? So that's an interesting angle too, because somebody had to weave it, and there were no mills, right? Yet there's no mills yet, and we won't see mills for quite a while, except in industrial areas, right? Outside of Boston, the whole Lowell area. We won't see mills in rural places yet that do fabric. It's more important for us to harness like the air, the water. In some communities, mills are like on Cape Cod to desalinate the salt water so there's more drinking water available. The one of the last things that will happen in New England is for mills to come in to be used for fabric, right? So people have to figure it out until this point, particularly when there's an embargo and we start having problems with England. There's an embargo and we're not allowed to trade with England anymore, and that is where we're getting everything milled, like all of our cloths from. So we enter the stage at that point when people start wearing very threadbare clothing and get very adept at altering stuff and patching stuff. And isn't it funny that we're back there now with all those little patch machines where you, whether your thing is ripped or not, your clothing is ripped or not, you're putting decorative patches on your clothing and your jean jackets. Isn't it funny that we're getting back there because we're upcycling, repurposing, and we're just decorating the hell out of everything similar, except then it was a necessity. Now it's like, you know, it's a crafty reinterpretation of your old clothes, but same spirit behind it. Not as desperate now, but same kind of a spirit behind it. Um, Judy says, "Okay, so let's do this because I need to lock this in." Jean says, "Warp goes the length of the fabric, the length of the fabric, so the long way, and the weft goes across the width. So the weft is like a finite size, right? It's the weft is this wide and it doesn't change, right? But the warp is when you stop, right? So you go as far as you want and then you stop, and that's the part you can control. I think if I'm picturing this right." Judy says shuttle would carry the weft yarn, so you could add additional colors. Yep, and textures by using multiple shuttles. Oh, that's so interesting. I did take weaving when I was in college at Marymount, which is now closed in Tarrytown, New York, and on the roster was Scandinavian weaving. So I did do weaving then, but man, I'm 52 now, and how old was I then? Like 17, 18, because I graduated early. That was a long time ago. And my memory of being on a loom, and this is not fair, but my memory of being on the loom was hardly any sitting weaving. It was mostly being in and under the loom trying to repair things that were broken. And like I felt like I hardly did any actual weaving. I found it super frustrating. But I remember there being a huge room with a lot of looms and one teacher, and a lot of people screwing stuff up and things breaking and having to fix them and waiting for the entire class period for the teacher to come over, right? What can you do? For the teacher to come over and help you fix yours. And by then, You haven't done anything. You haven't progressed. I made a scarf, I remember. The scarf is probably still somewhere. Good conversation as I'm weaving right now. Oh, that's what are you weaving on, Melanie? It's got to be something little, right? Is it something little? Could be something big. Judy says, that sounds lovely, Jean. I hope you share a picture. Jean says, I'm looking at the weaving I'm incorporating on my current piece of rug. Oh, God, that sounds Jean, you are always up to something. I can't wait to see that, too. Jean, I hear you about not remembering. Oh, it's the thing. Do you sometimes wonder, do I not remember because I'm getting old and my memory's going? Or do I not remember because it was so long ago and there was a lot of things in between? I hope it's the first one. I always think that. Linda B says A before E. Warp. A warp is set up first. That's the long way, right? And the weft builds on the warp. So the weft goes this way, and you're building it up as you go, row by row with the shuttles. Hope that helps. A before E. That absolutely helps. That helps a ton. That is an interesting project, Gene. You're going to have to keep us updated. So this idea of being inspired by coverlets, this makes a lot of sense, right? Because coverlets are in people's lives. Coverlets are something that we see in early America, right? Earlier than the hook drug in America. We're seeing this as like a cottage industry, people weaving these coverlet rugs. And then when the jacquard looming, the jacquard style weaving comes in, then we're seeing the jacquard style rugs. This is a big early American staple. I mean, when you go to antique stores and primitive stores, you see these coverlets. It's a big deal. So the idea that somebody would be inspired by the colors and the patterns on one of these coverlets makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? What images are we seeing on these early coverlets? Well, again, these coverlets are probably 1820s, 1840s. Rug hooking starts in the 1860s, right? So everybody who's done rug hooking, right? Everybody, I think without any exception, would have seen a coverlet. That would be a given. That would be a universal. This is another jacquard one. We can tell by the division of color. And what does this include? Flowers, leaves, and scrolls. Well, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? This one has a little bit of extra prestige in it, two other elements that we don't see as often in rug hooking because I think of the finickiness of it. The geometry, right? Like the grid, that very fine fiddly grid, and also the polka dots. We don't see that a lot in rug hooking, the polka dots, but it is a bit of bling, isn't it, for a coverlet? It's really like it's taking the idea of jacquard weaving right to the edge of what it can do. It's like let's fill every possible spot with a leaf, a flower, and whatever's left over, fill it with polka dots, right? Just to keep showing the color changes. That makes perfect sense. But it does mean that, like, if you were to do this rug design, four big fat cabbage roses, some scrolling leaves, a few stars in the tiny stars in the corners, scrolls around the edges, and a bunch of polka dots, that would make a great rug. But as rug hookers, I think we'd say to ourselves, oh, interesting, I don't see a lot of rugs with polka dots, right? Sometimes we see rugs with that confetti in the background, which literally means you are on purpose kind of filtering into your background fill, like a good solid fill, little bits, scraps of extra color, like little bits of tiny bits of hit or miss, like confetti, right? That's more like what these polka dots kind of evoke. But this is much more geometric because this is loomed. Karen says another way to remember the difference between warp and weft is the weft goes right to left. Left, weft. Okay. I will, there's a very good chance I will have to ask again, but these are two incredibly solid ways of remembering. Pam says weaving was slow. I tried it too, but not my thing. I can make pot holders though. Yeah, I'm working on it's not going to be done anytime soon, but I'm working on an oversized pot holder rug, like a full size one, like more a bigger than welcome size, and I want to do a full video on that. So if anyone's interested in doing that, you have to actually. I'm using the loop pot holders, and I'm cutting them and tying them together. So that's like if you do anything with simple looms, right? Like that have like nails across the tops, bottoms, all four sides, north, south, east, west. You know exactly what I mean. It's the same as making a potholder rug, but you're just having to attach the potholders together. Because I realized I have a stupid amount of vintage potholders kicking around. So that's one of the projects I want to do a video on, hopefully sooner rather than later. Let me see. Let me catch up. Good one, Karen. I like that memory aid. Yeah, we need these, don't we? Pam says, "Oh, I can't wait to see your." Yeah, it's a really cool thing. It's not a new idea, and it's not my idea. People have been making full size potholder rugs for a long time. Well, at least since I would say the 70s. But yeah, just on a simple, just nails on the top, bottom, and sides, and just same as making the potholders. But you have to keep attaching them, which means they have tons of knots, and the knots actually look great in the potholder rugs because it makes it all nubby. You know what I mean? It gives it lots of texture. And I think of it more as like a weaving, right? It's a time consuming thing. I think of it more as a weaving because of all the knots. It's not smooth, right? If you did it in a different material, you wouldn't have so many knots. But I'm determined to finish it with potholders. So we'll see how that goes. Could you use t-shirts? Yeah, you could definitely use t-shirts. Definitely. You could use the t-shirts. You could do the bow tie joins, or you could do the joins like this, right? Like a chain. I would just do the bow tie joins. I mean, they make, if you do them well and you make them nice and smooth, right? You smooth them down, right? That's all in the video I did on the multi-strand, the elusive multi-strand braided in rug. I show multiple times how to do the bow tie join in that, and other people have videos on doing bow tie joins. But if you're going to do t-shirts, perfect. But if you're going to do t-shirts with any kind of a rug, make sure that if you plan to wash the rug, make sure that all of the t-shirts are washed. Like wash them on hot, just to be sure, because if you plan to put the rug into the wash later and some of the t-shirts are already washed and some aren't, it's going to be a major shape problem when it comes out because they're going to shrink in different ways. So just make sure you are totally pre-shrunk. And also think about using cotton jersey sheets, like the t-shirt material sheets, because then you get a big, big amount. But yeah, you could definitely do that with the t-shirt rugs. Easy peasy. Oh, Diane, great to see you in Fort Worth. Good to see you. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. So, I love this coverlet idea. I think he could really be onto something here. China, yeah, coverlets, definitely. Definitely. Because these are all over really universal design. So this is another scrap of a coverlet, unknown age. Again, jacquard, going vertically this time instead of horizontally. But yeah, interesting breakup of color, right? And a bird design, birds with trees. This also resembles a fractor, right? But big fat roses. I mean, this is just a great design. This in itself could be a finished hook rug design. Can you imagine doing this exact thing? You can, right? Because this is certainly out of copyright, this piece of jacquard. But can you imagine this with a little bit of text around the edge? Maybe something about a bird in hand is worth two in the bush or whatever. But this could be such a lovely rug, just like this, just the way it is. No extra anything. Another idea. Now this is an evolution on the blueware. So his next idea, Kent's next idea, is did people get ideas from Spode China? Spode is one of the first China manufacturers to start incorporating the willow pattern. Now we won't get into a big conversation. Oh, I smell food cooking. It smells amazing. We won't get into a big conversation on English colonialism and all of that stuff. But needless to say, and if you got Magpie Times, I did a short article. Well, it wasn't short because I included some text, but on the book The Secret Garden, and I gave some because the cover design was my design of The Secret Garden, right? Of I was gonna say Annie Lennox. Wait a minute, why am I blanking out on the name? Isn't Annie Lennox of the Eurythmics? Something Mary Lennox. Mary Lennox. Here comes the rain again. My brain is just all over the place. Not Annie Lennox, Mary Lennox. But I did a little bit on The Secret Garden. I talked a little bit in there about colonialism because this affects design, right? At this moment in time that we're having this conversation about willowware, England rules more than 1/4 of Earth's people. Like not just the land, but the people. I mean, this is incredible, right? They own more land than that, but it's not how they populated. In terms of world population, the English rule more than a quarter. Tiny little England, right? This is the era of colonialization, and that is a whole conversation unto itself. But it's an interesting moment in history. But of course, with the all of the colonization. We're going to stick with the word colonization that England did at that moment, moving and taking over different lands, right? South Africa, they were exploring all over the place. Lots of islands, lots of places, lots of places. And during this time, they were kind of consuming the culture as they went, right? It's kind of like steamrolling method of incorporating people into the culture, right? And everything changes at that point. Huge conversation, but um, as they explore different areas, right, take over different areas, they control more trade, they control more territory, they control more people, and and everything, all of the sort of heritage and culture of the place, right? So this is problematic, but this is history. So during this time, the English are like all over the world, assimilating different aspects of other cultures, other world cultures into English culture. And we're talking about many years ago, but nonetheless, we see the sort of advent of all things Asian, right? We see willow pattern becoming super spode instead of doing the British church with the little style out front and the little farmers talking at the style. We're seeing the willow pattern designs, and this is a moment in time that is important and different. This is exoticism. This is for the Brits patriotism, right? Woohoo! Like look at how far we are getting and going. They are assimilating all of these other cultures, and so it take if you take away the political layer, right, which isn't for us as rug cookers to talk about, certainly not for me to talk about, just doing broad strokes here. But if we take away all of the implications and all of the sort of humanity angle, which is huge, and we just talk about design and the effects of this, all of these cultures bleeding into Western culture so suddenly, we get most noticeably things like the Asian landscape, right? On your dinner plates. So talk about immediacy, right? We're seeing suddenly views of Asia, China, whatever, Japan. People don't really know, do they? It's Asia. They're seeing different architecture, they're seeing different trees, they're seeing little bridges, they're seeing all of these weeping willows, all of these motifs, right? Everything is exotic and exciting and new. And you are doing sort of armchair traveling at the dinner table while you finish your ham and peas. And there at the bottom of your dinner is this transferware plate of somewhere in Asia. And you look at it and you're thinking, God, what is that? And then you learn it's a little pagoda building or something like that. You're seeing different costumes, different people, different shapes. It's like the moon. It's like looking at something on the moon. It's very exciting, right? Again, all the other implications aside, it's very exciting. So, do we see? So, specifically, this is a spode plate, right? We don't have to specifically talk about spode, but we see a lot of transferware accommodating the craze for all things exotic, and that is it's a lot of Asian stuff is coming in. This is an actual plate from that time, right? So something that's in color. I don't know what you call. Maybe this is a charger or something. I don't. Maybe this is an. I don't know. Could this be an ashtray? This looks small and it looks like there's dents on the corner. I'm not sure. But this is almost like a flow blue kind of bleeding thing, or maybe it's just the age, but it's a absolutely beautiful plate. But you can imagine for people who are living in the West, in England, these plates are coming on ships into Salem and into New England ports. You can imagine how exciting it was to look at this stuff and to say, is this really a place? Because it's not like the place I came from, and it's not like here. And other people go, oh yeah, this is a place, I've been there, it looks like this, there's trees like this, because it is very like Dr. Seuss, like the Lorax, like look at this tree. It is stylized, heavily stylized, but you are seeing a different world, a different landscape, different motifs, and it's exciting. Do you think that Kent is right in that we are seeing a lot of willowware and Asian themed transferware being the sort of backbone or the inspiration for a lot of early hook drugs in the United States? For me, I'm going to give that a hard no. I have seen precious few rugs from this period that have any kind of an Asian scene. You do see a lot of early rugs with that are geometric with a suggestion of bamboo. You do see that. But in my opinion, I don't think that there's enough trees that have an actual Asian theme using Asian motifs from China, as he's suggesting. I haven't seen enough of them myself, like looking through these old books included, to say I do think that that was a. Uh oh. I do think that was a great source of inspiration for people. I don't think he's right there. It could also be, he's only seen X amount of rugs. We have the internet. We've seen a lot more at this point, I think. So in that way, at this time, he has got the most. Him and Ralph Burnham have the most information that anyone has at this moment. And it's also worth saying that in 1930, Pearl McGowan has already started research, right? She's already started collecting rugs, traveling looking for rugs. She's already started, right? So she's not the big certification name yet. She's not the big teacher. She hasn't made her deal with Sturbridge Village. That is decades away. But she's already in it, right? She's already interested. She's already actively collecting. So she's getting started now. She overlaps, right? Because she starts in the 1920s with her collecting and um, kind of culling information and getting it ready for book form, right? She's right on the poised on the edge of doing her own writing and her own scholarship on the subject of hooked rugs. So she, weird to think about because this seems like a really old rug. Pearl McGowan was right there at this time already working in the same field, right? He doesn't mention her and he's not aware of her yet because she's just starting. And I don't know if in his later books he will mention her. I think he will have to because this is his first book. So because she has similar conversations in her books too, particularly Dreams Beneath the Design. She has conversations about the origins and her theories about the origin of different designs. And I have to say, because Kent is not a rug maker, right? And that's really apparent in the way he describes rugs and talks about the making. He does understand, in theory, how to make rugs, but he's not a rug maker. And Pearl is a rug maker. So there is a big difference in her language and his language. Same as any two people talking to you, one will probably resonate more than the other, right? And that's just life, isn't it? So here's another one. This is some kind of a geometric pattern. It's probably another coverlet, possibly a rug design. Hard to say what this is, but his caption for this is like the, in quotes, inch square patterns on rugs. So there's no other information. Right? I'm going to show you the full Monty right here. This is the caption. So this is all we get. I don't know what the source is, right? It would have been handy to say, well, what are we looking at? Is this something that's woven? What am I looking at? But he doesn't tell us. He just gives us this caption. So he's showing us something geometric that probably is a floor cloth or something like that, or a weaving. And he says this is like the 1-inch square patterns on rugs, but we don't know what it is. So interesting because we do see the 1-inch rugs, just like for quilters, right? You get the postage stamp quilts that were at one time called 1-inch quilts, or there was a more fluid way of saying the squares were 1 inch. Um, Same thing with rug making. We often see the 1-inch squares, right? We see a lot of that in the geometry of early rugs and rugs that are heavy on the hit or miss stuff. So he's got a good point there, but we don't really see a reference to it. I have to say, as interesting as this chapter is for like a conversation starter, it seems to me a little bit like he's grasping a little bit. And then he shows us another. Oh no, I showed this one. Sorry, I'm supplying this one. This is another coverlet that I pulled from the internet. Whatever he's looking at, and assuming it's another coverlet, it's a really far stretch to say that people get the idea for geometric rugs by looking at a coverlet. Like maybe they're half asleep, as I'm sure most women were sleepwalking through their lives and their busyness. But you could get an idea for geometry in absolutely anything. I mean, you could get the idea for brickwork, right? We see a lot of brickwork in rugs of the early 20th century. It's really a stretch, I think, to say that the 1-inch square compositions are inspired by coverlets. Maybe for some people, but everybody has seen things that are gridded in their lives at this point. Pretty coverlets that I found on the internet that I wanted to share. This is another one that's a weird stretch. So the caption for this, let me unlock it and I'll lift it so you can see it too. Akin to Turco-Prussian interlace. And it says, and I don't get this reference at all. If anybody gets this reference, please tell me because I went down the rabbit hole trying to figure this out and I didn't succeed. But he says, from a true Valentine of 1823, owned by Mrs. C.A. Adams. So I didn't catch, I couldn't bring up anything going down rabbit holes for this. It's hard. Okay. it's hard to say. Number one, this doesn't remind me of anything other than Pen Dutch hexes and Celtic knotwork. Right, those are the only for me. Those are maybe medieval illuminations or Scandinavian illumination, maybe. But this has a very Celtic feel to me. And again, he doesn't say what the object is. I guess it's a paper Valentine, maybe. I've never heard of a true Valentine, and the internet was not very obliging. This is like a little bit pretzely, and maybe that's just the smell of food cooking and me being so hungry. But this has a real hex feeling to me, like a Penn Dutch hex, right? Not like a witch's hex, but a Penn Dutch hex. And hexes, if you took the fracture class, they have a lot of different meanings, right? And they are all positive things that one would need, right? Like charms, like protection or good luck, prosperity, right? They were positive things. And you would paint them and put them on your barn or on your house or inside your house or on the chimney pot or whatever, on your hope chest, right? So I'm not sure what the reference to a true Valentine is, but he cites this as being one of the possible um, inspirations for early rug composition. I'm not quite there with him on this one either, but why not? Kathy says, I can see hearts formed by the scrolls. Yeah, their hearts are really prominent. I'm gonna have to say pretzel hearts. I got to stick with the pretzel hearts. They are really charming. When I did the design, like the Book of Kells, right? We did a lot with knot work, and we did a lot with drawing knot work in that design like class. And this has a very Celtic feel to me. It's almost like garden, like a labyrinth, not a labyrinth, but a garden. What do you want to say? Like I'm trying to think of the word for a blueprint for a garden, right? When you design a garden that has walkways a special way, there's a name for that. Oh, True Valentine is maybe a book. Could be Karen. Could be. It could be a book. It could be that he's showing a weird kind of disdain for the contemporary Valentine in the 1930s, because right, Valentines are being manufactured by then. Maybe he's showing like an early disdain for commercialized Valentines and Valentine's Day, saying a true Valentine. It might not actually be a thing. It might just be that he's saying he doesn't want us to be confused and think that this is some kind of Valentine postcard inspiration. Super hard to tell. The writing on this seems to be romantic and sentimental and hand drawn. Pam, excellent, because I can't see the writing even with these crazy glasses on. I got bottle cap glasses on or bottle whatever. Nature bound. Maybe his true Valentine was his or her lover. Well, that would be very nice. I like that. I like that spin. Maybe a poem that was written in the scrolls. It seems like there is text there that I can't see. But if you pause on this later, you might be able to read it or blow it up somehow. I can't see it even in this book with my crazy glasses on. I like all of these ideas. They're all romantic. I like all of these ideas, and they're all very viable. So, whatever he's referring to could be, and then this is an image that I found of just not work, right? So, yeah, I mean, he's saying like Turco Prussian, Persian, no, sorry, Turco Persian interlace is what he was calling it. This is like a Persian pattern, right? Like on tiles. So I don't know. You know, the for me, the problem with the voice with this book with Kent's writing is sometimes. Let's hold on that. Come back here. We're looking at stuff like this, and he's giving us kind of a laundry list of maybe rugs patterns are based on this, and maybe they're based on that. Well, he is someone who had a lot of money, right? He was of the leisure class. He had a lot of money. He traveled a lot. He had a lot of education. He studied art a lot. He didn't have to work, right? He had a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience with looking at art and traveling was locked in his head. So he's equating a lot of what he sees in how much of it is showing off. I don't know. Maybe none of it. Maybe none of it. Maybe accidental showing off, but saying like, "Oh, this reminds me of the Turco Persian." I mean, maybe he's traveled to places where he saw a lot of tiles painted in this manner or architecture that included these kinds of motifs, but other people haven't. And I think I'm personally going to veto this suggestion as well as the True Valentine, and as well as the 1 inch squares, because I just feel like when I think about what early rugs looked like, I don't see a lot of this kind of design in He's talking about 1700s to 1900 as far as early rugs. And now we're saying, I'm talking about 1860s to present. You still don't see a lot of this kind of designing in rugs, specifically older rugs. I haven't seen a single early hooked rug that took the time to do this kind of knot work in its composition. If you have, please let me know, because that would be an extraordinary rug. But I've never even seen a picture of a rug that includes this kind of thing, which makes me feel like he's showing off a little bit and going, oh, here's more design ideas. I've traveled far and wide. I don't know. I don't know. And it's probably very unfair of me to think that. So Jean says, reminds me of the Thames Shield, aka the Battersea Shield from Battersea. I'm sorry, people prefer to say Battersea now. I worked at the theater in Battersea when I used to live over there. That was a crappy neighborhood then. I bet it's much nicer now. The Battersea Shield from 350 to 50 BC, I found near the River Thames in London. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Now, Jean, I'm going to stick with Battersea because that's what I was brought up with. So the shield, is that in a specific point on the Thames? Is it heading more toward Battersea, or is it like downtown, like Charing Cross, like that kind of area? Because I would love to check this shield out in person next time I'm in London, which I hope is sooner rather than later. But that's really interesting. I would love to see an image of that. I would love to see an image of that. That's something that I didn't bring my phone with me because I feel like the signal interferes with what we're doing when we're live. But if Jean, if you have time, if you could just cut and paste that comment and send it to me in an email, I would love to be able to research that later. I'd love to see what that looks like. I found this image of a Persian horse. So this is not from the Kent book either, and neither was the last one. But this is a Persian image that obviously is copyright free. This is very, very, very old. This is, I think, 7th century, and that's just 7th century. This is a horse that has a bit of an interlaced design, very subtle, right? We're not talking about knot work, get it? But it does have kind of a clover design in the middle, and further emphasized by there being like flowers and clovery type flowers around the edges. So this is an early example of what will later be known as interlace, but isn't yet. So typical Persian type design, right? So copyright free. If this is something you like and you're thinking, ooh, now there's a rug, you can use this design just the way it is. It is a bit fussy where the horse's legs intersect, right? But I mean, it's manageable. It's definitely manageable. That is part of the knotting of it, isn't it? But it's beautiful. The horses have beautiful shapes, and for me, it's a little bit awkward where the horses meet, but it's still a great example of interlace. Jean said, no, the Thames Shield is an actual bronze shield in room 50 at the British Museum. Okay, so it's not on the Thames anymore. It's not like on a pedestal or on the wall or whatever. Okay, it's actually at the British Museum. Oh, that is so cool. So we can all go see it. It's safe. No, room 50 at the British Museum. God, I haven't been there in so long. It sounds real. You know, it's funny that you said that. It just reminded me, apples and oranges. But I just started a book. What the heck is it called? It's not set in London, but it's set in New York, and it's set in the 19, I want to say, 50s. Um, oh, what's it called? Does anybody else? I'm listening to it on Audible. It's about a family who lives at the New York Public Library because it has just been built. So maybe it's not 19. When was the New York Public? Maybe it's not 19. Well, there might be confusion of eras because in it, at the beginning, the problem of the story is that the woman is accepted into college. And the husband can't afford to allow her to go because she's also the babysitter of their kids. It is a very charming book so far. When I get more into it, I'll tell you if it continues to be great. But yeah, apparently, at least back in the day, one could, if you worked at at the New York Public Library, live there too. Can you imagine? There's like a whole quarter thing, like a whole oversized apartment for the superintendent of the public library, which I thought, whoa, that is, how cool would that be? Except that they had to make themselves scarce with young kids during the day because it couldn't be noisy being around all those reading rooms. It reminded me of the British Museum because I've been in the British Museum reading room, and that really was a great experience. The horse thing, Mom, is great, isn't it? horse lovers everywhere, right? This is a great, whether you want to use it as double as an interlace or just have it on its own, doesn't matter, right? It's just a beautiful pattern. Yes, yes, Pam, it is the Lions of Fifth Avenue. You just ordered this book from your library. Yep, it is the lions, exactly like the lions outside. How interesting. Thank you, Robin. Did you read it yet? And is it good? I always like to know if a book is going to be dark or violent because I don't want to keep going with it if that's the case. But so far, it's very lighthearted. It's just a bit depressing. Hopefully, that changes too. All right. Oh, sorry. Wait a minute. Accidentally deleting a slide. Let's not. Let's not delete. So, Kent's next thought: embroidery units. Right. He calls these embroidery units. This is an image again from. Okay, Robin really enjoyed it. The Lions of Fifth Avenue. Yeah, I just started it. I'm like 2 chapters in on Audible. It looked great. So, okay, excellent. Sort of an Anne Frank existence. Yeah, exactly, Catherine. It's that kind of thing. It's I have to get more into it, but it has a lot of atmosphere. And in my mind, the way it's described reminds me of the British Museum. That's why I just crossed wires with that. But it's that kind of, yeah, it's so far so good. Embroidery units we talked about a little bit the other day. Do you remember? And I said there are lots of books at this time already, and in the Victorian period. This one looks a little more contemporary. This looks like a 20th century one because we're seeing the turkey, right? So I wouldn't expect this to be an 1800 or 1700s one because we really don't start celebrating the turkey until the U.S. is a country. And Ben Franklin, remember, he was a great champion of the turkey as the national bird. And then Thanksgiving, right, becomes a thing when Abraham Lincoln makes it a specific day. So we don't see the turkey much earlier than 1860, but this would sort of dovetail with the timeline of our hook drugs. This does look a little more contemporary to me, though, just the style of the drawing. But the idea of getting patterns out of a magazine and using them, right, for, if not a magazine, a text that you could look at the library and copy the pictures like with your pencil. Yeah, this doesn't seem super old because I'm seeing spiders and bats and things like that. Yeah, we see a lot of insects in the Victorian period, but the style of illustration doesn't match the Victorian period. So this is a little bit more contemporary. But yeah, the idea of getting patterns out of a pattern book, yeah, that's very viable. I think a lot of people did that. Do you remember on Wednesday I said I started buying these books in the series of old patterns? And I said I'm never going to remember the girl's name. It's Angela Foster. So these are very thin books. I think they're about 15 each. And they're not for everybody at all, but they are for hardcore crafters who are really interested in pattern designs from specific times. This book, right, is specifically cross stitch patterns from 1589. And it looks like this on the inside, right? So again, this is not for everybody. Don't get them and think, oh, this is going to be eye candy. I'm going to be have this on my bedside table, pouring over it. This is information, and it's a bunch of drawings that she's done from embroidery, needlework, lace work, all kinds of crafts from that time. This is a huge amount of work. She's done a bunch of these, maybe like I don't want to, maybe 6 to 8, and I don't think it's like 10 yet, but she's doing a bunch of these, this author. And it's just, I really admire the fact that she is shoring up the history of needlework, right? Which is a subject that people have thought historically is not very interesting or important because you can get, these are cross stitch patterns and they're very, they would be large scale patterns, right? Like tableware and hangings and stuff like that, but you can combine the motifs as well. So I mentioned that the other day, and I just wanted to show you what the covers look like because I think they are print on demand on Amazon, and I got a bunch of them from different years to try to figure out. And the pages are not numbered, right? It's just hardcore, right? For the hardcore textile person who really wants to see the exact motif from 1589, it's a great source, right? So interesting. So yeah, would stuff from 1589 have been an inspiration for hook drugs? Probably not. It was that far back, right? But it would be in people's things that had flowers that looked like this and things that were Elizabethan and Tudor and all of that stuff would be in people's memories. Like that style of design would still be Jacobean stuff. All of it would still be in people's memories, but it was a very long time ago, right? By the time we get to our rug hooking. Yeah, Sharon, I think it's going to be a real gem. And Robin gave it a good review, so we know that we're good with that. And hold on, let me come back here. Karen says, I have all my great grandmother's cross stitch patterns from before women could vote. Very nice inspiration. Oh, that's awesome. Dawn says, hello. I'll have to. Oh, Dawn, great to see you. We've got a little while to go. But yeah, you can watch the beginning on replay. We did some fun stuff earlier. It is awesome, April. It's just awesome to know that there are people who are doing this kind of work, because everything slips by so fast. I'm not going to start that, but it does, doesn't it? This is an example of, this is not in the Kent book. This is something I found online. This is an example of a pattern book, right? So this was probably hand drawn that you might be able to use for reference. And God knows how old this is. This is German. So, this could be, I would guess that this is 1500s, I would guess. But I certainly don't know. But, this would be an example of a pattern book. People drawing stuff like this out, available as reference books to borrow, to copy the designs, right? This is maybe for embroidery slash lace making, that kind of thing. But yeah, German. This is a late 1600s motif, and German again because this is the Fracter font, right? We're looking at the Fracter font. So, yeah, beautiful needlework designs, and these were available. It might be that somehow you got a copy of something that had a design in it, and then you spent the next 20 years doing rug designs or coverlet embroidery, making bed rugs or whatever with these kinds of stitches. This is, I mean, look at some of the motifs in here, right? Look at the three pointed tulips, right? They've got leaves on the side, but those checkerboard three pointed tulips, if you were in the Fracter class, three pointed tulips usually represent the Holy Trinity, right? That's the 3 points. So that's a big motif in Fracter work, right? Not everybody is Christian who comes to Pennsylvania, but it is a big motif among lots of different kinds of people in all these different reform religions, right? That's why they're there in the first place, right? To be able to have that religion. And so things like the tulip, right, are very, very remarkably enduring, right? We still see that pattern in artwork today, right? Rarely, but you do see that style of tulip and the style of leaf and vine work in contemporary rugs, right? Not so often, but unlike some of the stuff that he's offering us as suggestions, this does look a bit familiar. This does look like the Jacobean work that Pearl McGann will do in the 1960s, right? It does bear some resemblance when he says, oh, that looks like snowflake designs that my great aunt did as a tatting sampler. Yeah, it's all crosses over. That's what's so exciting. I love the chapter of the book that he did here. It's the smallest chapter in this book, but it does open up a lot of interesting conversations. This is another piece of paper that he's got that simply says a Valentine maze. So this must be a thing, right? This must be a thing. Because remember back to the last one, that's all the caption we get right there. A Valentine maze. What is he talking about? We need to research this a bit more. God, if we could find some pictures, and I say we, right, on purpose, if we could find, oh, Lisa, good to see you, some pictures of these Valentine mazes, these could be really fun designs to do. This one looks less like Celtic knotwork. This looks more to me like the continental, like Versailles type garden plan, doesn't it? I mean, not like the British garden, like the wildflower garden, but the Versailles type, the European, continental European garden with lots of geometry, everything in its place, right? But all of these wandering lanes. Judy, oh, hey, Judy, looks like a herb garden. Yep, it does look like an herb garden. Looks like a Moorish design. Yep, it also does. Isn't that funny? Kathy says, wow, I looked at the image and immediately thought Fracter. Oh, thanks, Kathy. This is a great design, and it is a super geometric design. I'm gonna maintain. I don't think this bears a lot of resemblance to rug hooking designs, particularly old rugs. But I get what he's saying. It's an interesting line drawing. It has possibilities, but I can't think of any rug that I've ever seen that reminds me of this. That's in the kind of age that Kent is talking about. But is it an interesting design? Does it have a lot of inspiration for the rug maker? Absolutely. I think now more than ever, with our more evolved tools and the ease of making rugs now, this would be a great design. something interesting to think about, right? Little did he know that we would be sitting here on a Friday night looking at his book and talking about the likelihood of some of these ideas of his being actually the sources of early hook drugs. So this is an interesting one. This is another image from Antiques magazine. Berlin wool pattern in German style. So this is not what we now call Berlin work, but this is like a needlepoint. This is something done with a needle. This is a sewn piece. I think he's really onto something here. It's done in wool. It's German. It's definitely an inspiration for a rug design. It in some ways I think it's very similar. In the way that I think it's not super similar, the border is very similar, right? It's a little more lacy than we typically see in rug design. The four corners with the symmetrical flowers, very much like a rug design. The inner part to me is lead, and you have to disregard, all of the laciness and stuff because obviously that wouldn't be carried over to a rug. That doesn't translate well, particularly older rugs. But the center is where it looks yeah. Wendy, I love that. Rug cooking archaeology. I love that. That's a great kind of tagline. The center is where it kind of looks less to me like a hook drug, right? The scrolling borders and the flowers and all that. Yes. The floral design in the center, we typically see with floral rugs, whether they're early or 20th century rugs, we typically see a floral design that is that can be reversed, right? That doesn't have an orientation, like this is the bottom where the grass is. We typically see rugs that don't, so that they can be used in thresholds. And as you approach, there is no wrong size. We rarely see this style of rug, um, where there is a correct orientation. Like this is the bottom, and if you approach it from the top, it's the wrong way. So in that regard, that's a little bit different for rug makers. This is meant to be seen as a picture, so it would make sense for it to have a bottom. But for us as rug makers, until we start putting stuff on walls, we typically see designs that are topsy turvy. Um, and also the unusual coloring around that sort of flower shape around that central motif of flowers that shades in different colors. Weirdly, we don't see that in historic rugs. Maybe once in a blue moon, but in general, we don't see that in historic rugs. And why not? Because that really maybe because lack of having enough of one color, but that looks really pretty. It going from the white kind of background to the medium to the darker, and then kind of bleeding into the first border and then the outer border, right? That is a nice touch. I feel like we should have seen more of that over the years. What I was going to say earlier, just I'm glad I didn't think of it at 3:14, but what I was going to say earlier when we were talking was, how we keep saying the earliest that we can prove that rugs were being made with a hook is the 1860s. For this moment, that holds true. When Kent wrote this book in 1930, he thought it was Egyptian. It might be that we're wrong again. It might be that something emerges from somebody's attic, or somebody renovates a house, which I hope this one doesn't happen, and takes down some beautiful old walls. And maybe they have newspapers or corn husks for insulation. And maybe there's a diary in there that tells us more detail, and it shakes up the timeline of what we know. That's all. That's absolutely on the table. That's always on the table. But when you think about it, might somebody have been hooking before the 1860s? Absolutely. Somebody might be hooking, right? Somebody might have looked at somebody using a needle and one of those little sticks and trying to get the stitches over the stick and then pulling the stick out so it's an even height and thought, forget that. I think I got a better way to do that. Absolutely, it's possible. It's likely. It's probable. But for whatever reason, there weren't enough people. Maybe somebody in 1820 said, I'm going to bend a nail, right? This is going to work. Or bend a whatever, and it's going to work. Why not? But that if that person did that, or a bunch of people did that, they didn't tell other people, right? And then it didn't become a thing. So we don't have a population of people doing this technique until much later. It doesn't mean that people didn't do it, right? So it's important to bear that in mind too, because we shouldn't shut doors. As far as history goes, it's a moving target. It always is. So this is what we know so far. But yeah, it's just like nowadays. Sometimes people have a great idea and they think, "Ooh, watch me bend this hook. Watch me do this." And oh, here comes the neighbor, and they put, and they don't tell other people because it's their great hack. right? This happens all the time. This still happens all the time. This is why rug hooking is almost dead, because people have kept, in my opinion, people have kept a lot of secrets to doing things successfully with ease, quickly, in a way that your stuff turns out pretty, guaranteed success. When people hold that great information back with beginners, and beginners don't have great success, the craft isn't that appealing, is it? But people have always been like this, and they always will. So it's very likely that there was hooking way back when. We just can't talk about it because it's not documented. Jean says it would be interesting to talk to some of the Brits who know hooking history. I'd like to know the history of hooking there. Curious. Yeah, as far as we know, Jean, it's the same kind of a timeline. And the Brits were doing a lot with needles and proddy. Proddy was much more their go-to rag making technique. So there is a chapter of this book that's called Scottish rugs. It's called Scotch rugs. We probably won't get to that tonight. We might, but that's a whole chapter of this book, and it looks to be all proddy rugs. Their idea of rug, right, was much more utilitarian, high pile, thicker pieces, faster. And from the British rug books that I've read, because we've covered some on this show, there is a long history of people sitting together and cutting or ripping stuff up in larger pieces and prodding it down from behind, sort of in B situations with a giant frame the size of the rug resting on the kitchen stove and on the kitchen table, and everybody gathered around prodding down. And then you get this high pile, really dense, thick, plush, very pixelated because of the height, right? Very simple designs. Most common British design, the red diamond, right? That's a superstitious symbol to ward off evil, right on the doorstep or right inside the door. Big red diamond, right? For protection, like the Penn Dutch hexes. So there is a well documented history in the UK too. It's not that different than ours, except the emphasis on the rag rugs is just, it's more proddy than hooking, even in the 19th century. So looking at this, he's calling this Berlin wool work. Um, the definition of wool work, I don't know about. I can't speak for 1930, but this is what we call Berlin work now. And like I said on Wednesday, we now associate, at least if you go antique shopping or you're at an auction, if you see a piece of Berlin work come up, you number one expect it to be wool, and number two expect it to be a very elaborate sampler that includes not just motifs, but stitches, right? This is much more of a European approach to a sampler than the American New England schoolgirl approach to a sampler where we have an alphabet. The German approach to a sampler was doing both motifs, meaning pictures, birds, vases, horses, dogs, rabbits, whatever, but also doing stitches that would be possible stitches for borders and backgrounds and stuff like that. Good morning, Gail. Happy coffee time in Australia. Good to see you. So this is what we call Berlin work now. And if somebody said, this is right on the edge, right? Because this is just, these are images I found, right? The colored ones. This is just, this is not motifs, right? This is just patterns, designs, experimenting with stitches for backgrounds or fills or whatever, different parts of a sampler, but not the full blast Berlin work with the animals and the flowers. This is a this is not contemporary, but this is this is not like a 1500s. This is in late 19th century. And I know that, right, because there is a very strong African American vibe here. We see Lincoln, I think, in the middle with his top hat. We see two African American children on the top that say, "We're free." And we see the devil playing jump rope. And I can't figure what that symbol is, the character who's jump roping. But this is a very 1860s, 1870s moment in time. And it's an interesting wool work because, number one, it's American, it's not German, but it is a needle drawn, needle point wool work that is done in the German Berlin work style. So it is not a traditional sampler the way that we know them in New England, right, on the eastern seaboard. This is super 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 German flavor. It's like somebody remembered or did Berlin work, or or had some, right, and did this. And instead of doing motifs that were more traditional to do 100 years earlier, they did motifs that were relevant and current current motifs. I mean, that's really interesting. Judy says samplers were just that. Samplers of motifs would be used for other larger items like upholstery and rugs. Great info, Judy. Judy has Thistle Needleworks, right? That beautiful store that I visited once. We did that video. I hope you've seen that video on this. It's a Silas Steen, right, Judy, in Weathersfield in Connecticut. So, Judy, you have so many patterns of samplers and stuff too to work today in needlepoint, cross stitch, different things, right? But so many, so many. This one is really odd. This one sold at auction. I forget how much, but it was an extraordinary amount because it is an older fashioned style, but very, very contemporary motifs for its day. Now, here's another Kent idea. Tell me what you think of this one. I, I, I don't think this is one of his great ideas either, but sandwich glass. So he's saying this is a frigate, the frigate Constitution. Note the use of hearts and stars in the border, common in hooked rug designs as an elevation. Yeah, maybe, as was the elevation of the ship. Um, yeah. So, yeah, the elevation of the ship, meaning the side view of the ship, right? So you can see exactly what this particular ship looks like. So, yeah, he's not wrong. He's not wrong. I'm going to take it back. Sandwich glass, right? Sandwich glass. There's a few glass companies in New England that argue about being the first. Sandwich glass is on Cape Cod in the town of Sandwich, and it's trying to think of when they were incorporated. I want to say like early 1800s. I toured it this past summer. I loved it. I did a lot of photos there. So if you're on my page, I think I posted some photos in our Facebook group too. I took lots of pictures of the historic glass in there. So that would be relevant to go back and look at that post now. He might be onto something. Sandwich glass was pressed glass, right? And particularly known for the cranberry glass, right? Because both the reason the glass company evolved in Sandwich on Cape Cod was because they needed the sand to make the glass, and Cape Cod is like over 90% silica, meaning sand, right? So because of, as Henry David Thoreau said, its sandy character, it lent itself in terms of situation a perfect place, like endless supply of sand, right? So Sandwich Glassworks springs up, and they are known for their cranberry glass, but for their pressed glass. Pressed glass means that it is literally pressed and it makes whatever design the mold is. In this case, the mold is this boat with this border of the hearts and stars. So Kent's point is this a thing? People, a lot of people sitting around with sandwich glass. I think there were a lot of people sitting around with sandwich glass, if not sandwich glass, other pressed glass, right? Pressed glass goes right through the 20th century, through the Depression era. All of those free plates and things that people were given during the Depression era from companies, they did the sort of lower quality pressed glass dinnerware and stuff as incentives, and for buying X amount of stuff, right? They were giving really nice gifts to people at that time because people desperately needed the leg up. But we're seeing pressed glass through the 20th century in huge numbers. Lots of different motifs from region to region, company to company. So saying sandwich glass is maybe too specific, but pressed glass in general, yeah, you see a lot of pictures on pressed glass. You see a lot of scenes, boats, houses, flowers, landscapes, right? Animals. You see lots of designs in pressed glass. Also, geometrics and just full blast hearts, things like that. This is a combo of both the scene with the boat and this ornate border. So, really interesting. Oh, Catherine, you said jumping rope with the devil. Yikes. Red hot peppers. That was such a weird, and that wool work faded so beautifully too. That was one of the things about it that I thought was extraordinary. Yeah, so maybe pressed glass. If you, it depends household to household, and it really depends on what year we're talking about. This is a photo that I added. So this is more pressed glass. This is clear, right? But pressed glass came in all kinds of colors. Again, Cape Cod, it was the cranberry colored glass that was the most important, but you get the cobalt blue glass, you get the sort of the yellowy, the saffron color of glass, the amber, right? There's lots of different colors of glass. Red glass as opposed to cranberry was very popular too. Depending on where you were, different companies were known for different colors of glass, but also different motifs. And when you look at this little tray or plate or whatever it is, maybe it's a butter dish or something like that, and you look at the flower, you think, yeah, Somebody sitting there spacing out could say, "Ooh, didn't have an idea for the next rug, but here it is, right here on the butter dish." That's entirely likely. Um, oh, Judy says, "I've been pulling out my mother's depression glass to make floral displays for my daughter's wedding this fall. Such a trip down memory lane." That is such a gorgeous idea, Judy. That is absolutely perfect. That's a great idea. This is a great this is a great idea because now I'm thinking if you have this kind of stuff, you know, if you have stuff in your attic that's family stuff, right? Memory museum stuff that's special and it's from your family, sometimes we don't think about the way that a butter dish or a tureen or something translates as a rug hooking pattern, right? So maybe this chapter of Kent's book is really useful. It's very thoughtful because maybe it does. Next time you have breakfast and you're spacing out and you look at the butter dish, maybe there is on your china or your pressed glass, maybe there is a design that you think, gosh, we've had this in our family for a really long time. Maybe the top of your silverware, even, right? Maybe you could incorporate those designs into your next rug. And we might just say, oh, look at the pretty flowers, but you know where it came from. And then it's that much more special, isn't it? You don't have to be an artist to design your own rugs. If you can copy a motif from your butter dish or take a photograph of it and take it to Staples, you have a design, right? You don't have to be an artiste with a capital A. Um, Pam says we have a lot of pink. Oh, how pretty! Pink glass depression glass we call it. Oh, that must be super pretty. April says, "What a treasure, Judy. Those will be beautiful." That's a great idea. Judy says, "Most of mine is pink." Isn't that funny? I can't picture the pink. Is it very transparent, the pink? Because there's also a lot of pressed glass that's the slag glass, right? That was another sandwich glass thing. The slag is like it's more opaque, right? It can be a mix of opaque and transparent, or it can be just full blast opaque. And there's a mix of different colors in it. It's sometimes what people call end of day glass when they use the last of the bits they've got, they put it together in a mold to do like one of the things, at least with the Sandwich Glass Museum, that is a in antique language super desirable. You know the chickens on the nest. You know those the little dishes that come apart. I don't know if they're butter dishes or what they're intended for, but it's like a chicken on a nest and it's pressed glass, but it's three-dimensional, and the tray is the nest. Well, there's a lot of sandwich slag glass that's chicken on the nest, and it seems to me from what I've seen, because I don't collect these, maybe one of these days, but I don't collect them at this moment. But what I've noticed is the most expensive ones are the most oddball ones where it's mixed slag glass and there's multiple colors, and like there's a weird spot on the chicken, like on his face, just like a spot, and it's not colored in. It's like a weirdly placed accident spot of a different color. The ones that look the most oddball seem to be the most valuable ones that people fight over on like eBay auctions, so, because they're super one of a kind, right? When you see the placement of a certain color in a certain place, it's like, I better have that one because I'm never going to find that one again. It's not a solid one. So it's just interesting because these are all great inspiration things. The chicken on the plate would make a great rug hooking design too. Very country. Yes, it's transparent. Love the transparent pink glass. I can picture that now that I know it's transparent. Judy says this is translucent. There are a few pieces of carnival glass that show the oil slick. Yeah, the carnival glass is, I love that. Super shiny metallic, right? Super high shine, like an oil slick, like you spilled some gasoline if you're gassing up and it's like a rainbow. Super, super pretty. Very hard to translate into rug hooking. But a lot of that glass is so beautiful. The carnival glass, we can still use the line drawings and the shapes, right? That part still translates. So I like this conversation on pressed glass. And, he specifically says sandwich glass, but we don't have to say sandwich glass. We could say any glass designs. So he's mentioned china, he's mentioned glass. I mean, this is interesting. This is another interesting one that I would have never thought about. Hold on one second. I got to wet my whistle here. Let's do one. Cheers, my dears. This is a daguerreotype case, right? So daguerreotypes were the early photographs that people posed for. And daguerreotypes came in these cases. And the cases were like pressed, they were like pressed leather or gutta perca. Do you know that material that's like an early plastic? I don't know if any were done in lava, but like any of the material, gutta percha I think was the most common in leather, tooled leather that daguerreotype would come in. So he doesn't say what material this one is. I'm thinking it's a gutta percha, but this is a pattern of Victorian character, not unlike a hooked rug design. So listen to this. This is the caption, right? You can see it right here. American daguerreotype case of the 19th century, pattern of Victorian character, not unlike a hooked rug design. So this chapter is a bit of a stretch for him too. It's not like Kent to be whimsical. It's not like him to wax poetic, right? He's a very kind of no nonsense talk speaker. But in this chapter, he really goes out on a limb, and he's just showing us these random items, these household items, and going, could this be a design for a hooked rug? You know, and it's just an interesting character. It's like a different voice. It's almost like he collaborated with someone on this one chapter. I think he's really onto something here. When I looked at this, I thought, oh, come on, you're really reaching. But then I looked at it again and I thought, this is his image in this one. I thought, oh, you know, this bears a lot in common with a hooked rug design because we have the outer border, we have the inner border, we have that very tight scroll work around the central field, which in this case is floral. So, unlike a hooked rug, again, this has an orientation, this has a top and a bottom. A hooked rug would want to be more topsy turvy, right? It would want to be sort of interchangeable top and bottom. But in terms of it being flowered in the center, having a big border, going out to a scroll motif or a leafy scroll motif, and then going to a final, more sort of formal, smaller border, man, that is the very definition of an early rug or the ideal of an early rug. In country places, no, right? But for people who were manufacturing, like at home, right? Groups of people, mostly men, manufacturing rugs for money, right? These would be the kinds of formal designs that they would attempt to do, very grand, right? Very large scale rugs that they would attempt to do, crossing over to what was perceived as the Oriental style of rug, but with more of a Victorian flavor, right? Look at this design as opposed to, for example, I'm going to use the term Oriental rug. This is way more romantic, isn't it? It's all of these round curves, like all of these like lush swirls, lots of opportunities for color, for leaves, for organic shapes, right? Very Victorian in its nature. I found some more pictures on the internet of daguerreotype covers. This is a tooled leather cover. I can just tell by looking at it. Um, Exactly, right? This is absolutely a great hooked rug design. Now, basket designs are an exception, right? We see a lot of basket designs, more baskets than vases in the early rugs of the 19th century. Baskets do have an orientation, right? You can't help but have an orientation. There's a basket, right? It's a still life. So we do see some baskets, and it is a popular motif. Flowers floating in a field, right, becomes more popular, but baskets are also there. We do see them. This looks just like 100 rugs I can think of. Very realistic, nice sort of graphic stylization of the flowers, right? This is just leather. We're not seeing any color suggestions, so it's up to the imagination. In this case, we're seeing a really cool border, right? It's got those nice circular sweeps at the corners, but it's got a lot of nice sharp angles too. It's a nice mix, right, of curvy and sharp, right? Good contrast, good tension, good drama going. The very structured border and the very sort of willowy, floral, lots of filigree in the center. Good contrast. This would be a great design if you're sitting there looking at a photograph of somebody at any of these. This is a Gutta Percha example that would open up, right? You would maybe be looking at this and thinking, this is more architectural, like ceiling plasterwork kind of a thing. But you could see somebody looking at this and thinking, oh, yeah, I've got it now. I know what I need to do in the center of the rug. I was fooling around with the borders because I couldn't decide. Now I know what to do. Or if you went to visit someone and they said, look at this picture of my son, right? And they handed you one of these daguerreotypes, you might be holding it thinking, there we go, right? There we go. I mean, one of this ones at the bottom, right, is like has got inlaid like mother of pearl, but the others have some kind of a design on them. And this one, the center one, it looks like it's open. Remember that with daguerreotypes, the inside of the cover was velvet, right, to protect like the glass on the photo. was velvet, but was like cut velvet or pressed velvet, like pressed like with heat. That made a great design too. So that was a secondary design, right? There was no reason to think that the design on the velvet would match the design on the cover. And a cover could be different from front and back as well. So you could be looking at something in your hand with three different designs on that would all make great rug patterns. That little red piece of velvet in the center, that's a perfect rug pattern because it doesn't really have an up or down, right? It's got one flower on each side, the stems and the leaves going through the middle. I think it is meant to be held that way. But man, you add a flower or two and you have got a topsy-turvy rug, perfect for a floor rug of any size, right? There it is in miniature. Perfect design. I mean, you don't need to be an artist when you look around you and observe. We are now in the habit in our day and age of looking on the internet. Every time something comes up, right? You look on the internet. I do it all the time. I couldn't live without doing it. I mean, I always have the phone with me because I think, oh, wait a minute. And then I look it up. And I mean, that's how I learn. That's how I figure things out. That's how I gather information and inspiration. But in those days, obviously, that wasn't an option. And you would just, I think you must have, your senses must have been much more sharply attuned to pretty things, right? Because you do see in literature, in the writing of that period, you do see such a keen and sharp appreciation for things that are pretty because there were less of them, right? Things that were decorative, little bits of flowers, things you would press in the pages of a book, anything decorative, people were very conscious of, noticed, celebrated because there weren't so many pretty little things. It was not a disposable culture. Everything that was around you that was pretty was something you would enjoy and notice. Um, and it would be the same if you visited other people and you looked at their stuff and you looked at their photo of their son and you thought, ooh, wait a minute, run back home. So I think that was the last idea that Kent had in that chapter. So, man, we pretty much spent the whole episode having that conversation, but it's a great conversation. I have a whole other episode. It's huge. I put it together this afternoon that we haven't even started yet because there are a ton of great photos of old rugs in this book, and I want to share those too. And there's a few moments in this book that are, besides the Canadian chapter, that are just impossibly quaint in a moment in time. There's also some other bits in this book that are really things I have never heard before about rug hooking, right? Because I have not read the book cover to cover. So it's like really interesting stuff. So we will return to this book for sure on Monday. Judy says, I logged in very late. Did you explain your wallpaper? No, this is, Judy, this is one of the images in the book that we haven't gotten to yet. I had a feeling, this is my chair, but I had a feeling we wouldn't get to this image, but this is one of the images in the Kent book that we will look at later. It is I'll just say now, you're going to see part of my chair in here, and this is wrapped around with the green screen, but this is an interesting one that we'll look at maybe on Monday if we get to it, but it looks like it was a hooked rug style, probably the shape and size of a burlap sack or a sugar sack or flour or something like that, and then expanded right around the edge, like somebody attached more, I think, material to it, made it much, much bigger than this. But this is one of the designs that we'll look at a little bit later because this is one of these curious hybrids of floral and geometric, right, which we see in very early rugs. It is the sweet spot of collecting. So, oh yeah, you are so welcome. Yeah, it's a lot of fun to go through this stuff together. And God, it's so fun to brainstorm, isn't it? We did some great brainstorming about weaving and different designs, China. We had lots of interesting conversations in this episode. And I will look forward to more interesting conversations. So I will be with you on, oh, the kids are off this week, but I will be with you on Monday. Yeah, the kids, with them on vacation. I'll have to see how it goes. So I might be with you on Monday and Friday. I'll let you know as we go, but I'll definitely be with you on Monday. So we'll look at some more of the Kent book. And if you have more thoughts that you synthesize over the weekend, make sure that you lock them in so we can chat more. You all contribute so much to these conversations. It really keeps it going. Thank you, Diane. Well, hey, happy weekend, everybody. And happy spring. I don't have much to tell you other than I still haven't put the video up for you that I meant to put up with the little cutting board with the punch design. Isn't it National Punch Day this weekend? Help me out. Is it tomorrow, National Punch Day? Because I shut my phone down. It's either tomorrow or Sunday, National Punch Day. And I know the Amy Oxford, right, the Oxford company puts out a design by a different person each National Punch Day. I'm such a jerk, but I completely forgot who the design is by this year. But there's sort of a drive to get as many people punching that specific design as possible. So maybe you're participating in that. I think I'm going to be a bit crazy with the kids, but happy Punch Day to everybody. Happy weekend. Happy weekend to you all too. Happy weekend. Happy Punch Day, and I will see you all on